Ming will be talking about. Hi everyone! I'm going to start my talk the same way I start most of my talks, which is I suffer from anxiety, PTSD, and I'm an introvert. Which might surprise people because I'm standing in the front of a room talking and doing public speaking. But for me, this is the safest space in the room because I'm closer to the exit. The other reason is I can actually feel a lot more in control of the room, and I don't have to go up to people one-to-one and introduce myself because I really hate small talk. So this is how I manage walking in a room. And today I'm talking about being underestimated and being an invisible leader. And first of all, I'm going to explain where this talk came from. So like with most things, it came from a conversation. And it's a conversation that I often have with people who are in the tech space or in business who don't feel they are a leader, who also feel they're disadvantaged, who often feel like they're one or two women or people of colour within an organisation. And so they feel like the game is rigged. And the conversations go somewhere along the lines of, it is a position of power to be the most invisible person in the room, because you get to observe people. When you're invisible, you get to see how others treat others, good or bad, and you get to make a decision as to whether or not you're going to take these people with you. Because despite all the challenges you might have, whether or not it be gender, race, accessibility, eventually you will get there. And when you do, you get to make a decision as to who you take with you. So, I thought leadership for a really long time was this straight line up. And then I discovered that it wasn't. And in some cases, I went backwards. The blue line is my journey in leadership. At certain stages in my business, in my life, I would get to a manager role, and then I would be told I was too bubbly to be a leader, or that I wasn't good enough at my job, or I didn't look very normal. I needed to be more normal. Maybe you should just have normal hair. Maybe you should tone it down. And the fun part of that is I never take that advice. I'm a little bit of a rebel. One of the things I discovered in leadership was it's a fine line between fearlessness and stupidity. And a lot of the time, we actually self-sabotage when we get near success. So because I spend so much time observing people, I also observe the fact that it's not the fear of failure all the time, but sometimes it's the fear of success, because we don't feel like we're worthy. Certainly that was my own journey. In fact, when people asked me, are you scared that you're going to fail? I was like, nope, failure and I are really good friends. We know each other really well. We're like BFFs. Success, however, terrified me. What would happen in success was that I'd get close to success and then I'd run back to failure because it was a lot easier. Some of you in the room have already heard part of my journey and part of my story. And part of my story is in things like child abuse. So for the first 17 years of my life, I grew up in an extremely violent environment. And I was homeless by the time I was 17. Not because I ran away from home, but because of economic situations. By the time I would get to 32, my fiance died in a motorcycle accident. For all intents and purposes, I shouldn't be in a role of leadership. I shouldn't be a CEO of a company, according to what everybody else says. But you don't have to have a hero's journey to get here. You don't have to suffer in order to be a leader. Because leadership isn't actually about suffering or being a martyr. It's about who are you raising with you? How are you helping others? How are you giving a hand up rather than a handout? So, these are the things I look for in invisible leaders. For the people that I'm looking for to bring along with me in the journey. I'm looking for the tea bags. Because no matter how much hot water you put them in, they still hold the tea. They still do the job. They still get it done.
Here's a matching video.
I love pockets. Especially love invisible pockets. Especially love pockets that fit my entire phone in them. And I find sometimes people are pockets. They have these hidden superpowers that you never knew they had. And they can store a lot. You don't know actually how much you can fit in there. People who fill from a full cup, not an empty one. When you fill from an empty cup, what you're doing is you're turning into a martyr. You're self-sacrificing yourself. Throwing yourself in front of the bus. When you fill from a full cup, there's no expectation in return. Because you're already full. You're already taking care of yourself. I talk a lot about mental health. I'm an ambassador for Are You OK Day? And what a lot of people don't realise is all the work that I do behind the scenes to make sure I'm okay to give these talks. I make sure my cup is full before I help others. There's a couple of people in the room that I wanted to do a little bit of a shout out to. So, like all good leaders, they had good leaders who helped them along the way, who cheered them across the board. When Nerida and I first met, we were roomies at a retreat. I hated her. I wanted to punch her in the face. Because she's an extrovert and I'm an introvert. And she was like, "Hi, how you going? Let's be best friends." I'm like, "Oh my God, kill me." But Narada has always been a champion for me. She's supported me along the way. She's coached me. She's a coach in her own right and coaches people. Then there is Lynn. Who's also in the room. Lynn, I also wanted to punch in the face. Turns out that all my best friends are people that I really, really hate at the beginning because they push me and they challenge me. And Lynn and I will often have conversations about how we're both surprised we're friends. Lynn's an incredible mum. But she's not just an incredible mum, she's also in her own right become a marketing leader. And I've watched her career grow. And I've watched her step from one role to another. And Lynn is awesome. Amy! Most of you who follow Amy on the Twitter would know that Amy loves me. She's my bestest fan. She amplifies me all over the place. She speaks about me. She tells people about me. But also, in her own right, she is a leader. She travels around the world. She gives amazing talks. She codes like a goddamn demon. And then, of course, there is Michelle. Michelle and I had a conversation a few years ago when I believed I wasn't a feminist. I was convinced I wasn't a feminist. I was like, no, I'm an equalist. And Michelle pointed out to me that when a manager of mine told me that I was bubbly, what would they have said to a man? What would they have said to a guy? And she pointed out that I had had challenges, I just hadn't realised it. I just kept going. Because my version of dealing with fear is to feel the fear and do it anyway. Thanks so much, guys. I don't know if there's any questions. Anybody have questions?
Thanks, Ming. Do we have any questions for Ming?
What would be your, if you could give advice to your younger self, what would be your one piece of advice that you would?
Calm down. I think I've spent an enormous amount of time stressing about things that I either had no control over or I just didn't feel I was worthy of. And so I would fight a lot of the time with myself more than anybody else. And I just needed to calm down. That would have been the advice I would have given myself. Good question.
Yeah, thank you. That was very inspirational for myself.
Thanks so much, guys.
Do
Thank
you
you.
have any more questions for me?
What's your biggest challenge now as a CEO?
So each time I reach a point where I grow in business and I freak out, and it's getting a lot lesser and a lot smaller than it used to be. Like it used to be, I would just self-sabotage and sending invoices because I didn't think I was worthy of money. And now I'm in growth at the moment, so I've got a team. I have 5 people that I employ now and give opportunities to. And it freaks me out each time we grow. So yeah, at the moment it's just, when you grow you have different problems than when you stay small. So yeah, at the moment it's actually probably delegation and handing stuff to somebody else because I feel like I have to do it all, because if I don't do it all then am I really working? So I have these wonderful little stories I tell myself about that. Yeah, that's probably one of my greatest challenges right now. Good question, thank you.
Favourite self-care routine?
Naps. And disconnecting from my technology and yeah, relaxing in nature, finding somewhere in nature.
How do you find a feeling of self-worth?
Sorry?
How do you find that? So you mentioned a lot about not feeling worthy. How do you flip that?
A lot of it comes from old stories from my childhood and figuring out what the root cause of those stories are. Our brains like to create a lot of evidence that our stories are real. And so if part of your story is I'm not worthy, you'll go and seek out that evidence all the time. And I think, so one of the I love mental hacks and trying to hack things in my head so I can overcome them. And one of them is, rather than seeking out self-worth, acknowledge and accept that I already have it, and then find evidence that how it shows up for me. Because the opposite evidence is always there, it's just you're not looking there because we all like to look at the train wreck. So especially when you've grown up, so for me I grew up in an environment where, yeah, that self-worth was non-existent. So for me it's just constantly going, how do I show it? Like today, Nerida sent me a message saying she was going to be late. And I had a little mental freak out going, she's going to be late, she doesn't love me! That used to take a month or 3 months out of my life where I would stress out and I'd get really upset and I'd get really worked up on this silent little agreement that I had made. And then now it takes me maybe a good half an hour to get over that one. But it was acknowledging that that situation was not my childhood situation. She's not to know, how does she know she wasn't there? Because that's what we do is we build evidence and then we take that forward in each situation to the next one. So we've almost got to disrupt the pattern. Really good question.
How can existing leaders help support and champion hidden leaders and invisible leaders? How do you help make it safe for that to for people to grow into that?
So I think it's so first of all it's about encouragement. So for me it's the conversation I have with them about it's okay that you're not a leader yet, but here's all the ways you can be. And in fact you are actually already a leader and here's how, and giving them the demonstration of the fact that that whole invisibleness of being an invisible leader is that you do get to observe people. You do get to observe people because when you're invisible, people don't wear their masks so tightly when they don't think they're being watched. And when they don't think that the person who's watching them is important. I wrote an article a little while back on LinkedIn which was Dear Old White Guy Who Told Me to Get a Job Today. And I prefaced it in the first paragraph going, okay, I'm not talking to all the old white guys who are in my network, obviously you're cool because you're connected to me. But all the other old white guys, and this particular one who decided one day, who walked posing and crossing the street, who told me to go and get a job because apparently I look homeless. I wrote an article response to go, and it was an acknowledgement to say, you're so funny. You're so funny that you think your opinion counts for something. And I sort of acknowledged how far we've come. Like I talk on the radio, I'm in the media, I talk on Channel 9. 50 years ago, that would not have happened. I would not have had those opportunities presented to me. And so it was an acknowledgement and a gratitude for everything that I've achieved to date. And I think that's a good question to ask them is, what are you grateful for? What have you learnt so far? Because people get, when they come across a narcissistic or psychopathic boss, especially, they feel disarmed and disabled in the workplace. And so advise them it's okay, you get to be an observer in this situation. You get to see how they treat people and you get to support people, but make sure that your cup is full.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions? We have 9 minutes before the break, but we don't mind breaking. Yeah, we don't mind breaking for an early break if you guys don't have any questions. Yeah? So, yeah.
Well, maybe one is like leadership works in certain contexts. And if that context is not suitable to the individual, what are some of the things you can do to help that individual in a difficult context?
Can you give me an example?
They're a quiet person in a loud team. So, simple example.
So I find, so they don't have to be anything other than themselves. Like I'm quite a loud person, but I have quiet people in my team. And I always say to them, I don't need you to show up any differently than what you're doing. How you're showing up is actually perfect. And how they communicate, is figuring out how they communicate. If they're a quiet person, how else do they communicate? So as a leader in that position, are they verbal communicators? Are they written communicators? Are they good listeners? People who don't tend to be very loud are very good at listening. And that's a valuable skill. And pointing out what those valuable skills look like. I've got a transgender man on my team who's an introvert and also suffers from really bad situational anxiety, doesn't like to leave his house. Like the drive commute from his house to the office is very, very stressful for him. But how he shows up is all the content he creates is beautiful. And it's reminding him that he doesn't actually have to show up in any other way. There's no other expectation for him around that. And I think that's the thing, is managing those expectations. Because sometimes when you have a big team full of loud people, they feel pressure. Yeah, they feel pressure to do that. So that's a really good question. Thank you.
I was really looking forward to have a couple of minutes myself because I wanted to steal one question from
Yeah.
This was like, so for me personally, what has been your biggest challenge in the journey so far and how do you overcome it?
My biggest challenge is myself. My biggest challenge has been overcoming my own internal thoughts around situations. I think one of the things I say in my talk for mental health is if we put a loudspeaker to our heads and broadcast whatever was going on in our heads, we would never say those things to another human being. Why is it okay that we say it to ourselves? And a lot of my challenge has been really getting over those internal voices. And then, you know, and because everything's a mirror in how we do, because we're all trapped in Michelle's matrix. So, you know, it's, yeah, no, I think it's mostly just getting over tragedy and challenges and grief and all of those things. And they're all really, really hard things to show up in.
Well, that's up to you this morning. On this note, please give a round of applause.